Hello, my name is Rachel Rubio, and I am the Educational Specialist for Dyslexia grades K through 12. It is my pleasure to be able to spend the next hour with you as we explore the Virginia Literacy Act, FCPS's Equitable Access to Literacy Plan, and the numerous instructional shifts that are happening to support all of our students, including those with dyslexia and/or dysgraphia. Today's conversation will primarily focus on updates to the English Language Arts core instructional block for elementary and secondary. We'll also talk a bit about what's still to come as we continuously work to improve the current state of literacy instruction. Before we get started, I want to go over our outcomes for today. First, I'm going to take some time to explore the Virginia Literacy Act. The state is working hard to provide resources to districts across the state and ensure that we are prepared to be in compliance with the legislation at the start of the 24-25 school year. Next, we'll take a look at what the science of reading is and the theoretical framework for our literacy instruction in FCPS. We'll explore how these models are represented within FCPS's Equitable Access to Literacy Plan and what these instructional shifts mean for our students with dyslexia and/or dysgraphia. We'll wrap up today's session with a brief discussion of district-level resources for students with dyslexia and their families. There will be a more robust exploration of these resources in October at our annual Dyslexia Open House. As we move through this presentation today, I encourage you to pause, reflect, take notes, and before we conclude this presentation, I'll provide my contact information for questions about the information from today's session. Before we dive into our exploration of the Virginia Literacy Act, the Equitable Access to Literacy Plan, and what this means for students with dyslexia and/or dysgraphia, I want to take a moment to ground us in our understandings of what type of instruction is required for our students with dyslexia and/or dysgraphia. When you think of literacy instruction for our students with dyslexia, possibly other reading disabilities, and/or dysgraphia, what comes to mind? What are you picturing, or what words do you think of? Maybe words and concepts like explicit instruction, structured literacy, phonics, early identification and intervention come to mind. Maybe you pictured a lesson being delivered utilizing the Orton-Gillingham methodology. Or maybe you're not sure yet about what exactly the instruction should look like, but you're hopeful to learn more about resources available to students with dyslexia and/or dysgraphia. I think you'll quickly find that many of these words will be recurring during our time together, and I hope that I'm able to provide you with information about FCPS's literacy instruction and resources readily available to students with dyslexia and their families. I am so glad that you've joined me for something that I'm extremely passionate about and excited to share with you today. The Virginia Literacy Act was written by educators, parents, legislators, and community stakeholders to reverse trends in literacy and ensure all students in K through 3 read at benchmark, provide support for at-risk readers and those that may have experienced learning loss due to the pandemic, and to ensure teachers, administrators, schools, districts are provided training and resources necessary to provide evidence-based literacy instruction that aligns to the science of reading. This legislation has bipartisan support in order to make numerous changes within our educational system. When VLA was written, stakeholders agreed that we needed improvements in multiple areas of our system, and we couldn't just focus on one or two. The Virginia Literacy Act, also known as VLA, focuses on the areas seen on the screen, and we'll explore those more in depth in just a moment. But really, all of these shifts fall into two buckets. The first being science-based reading research, and the second being evidence-based literacy instruction. I wanted to share this information because I think it's important to keep in mind that this is a comprehensive effort to make changes across our system to best support all students in Virginia and within FCPS. As I mentioned on the previous slide, the Virginia Literacy Act includes multiple components of change. The state is currently in the process of reviewing and selecting a list of core curricula that is aligned to the science of reading that districts can utilize. Once this final list is released, FCPS will begin the process to select a Tier 1 curriculum. This is a really important step as the core curriculum must be strong. What is good for our students with dyslexia and dysgraphia is good for all. A similar process will take place next to review intervention materials. In addition to curricula, additional screening, assessment, and intervention options are being added to identify those students who may require additional reading support. Once identified, a reading plan will be developed in partnership with parents. Keep in mind that these changes will all go into effect for the 24-25 school year. Another large part of the Virginia Literacy Act is the professional development required of teachers, reading specialists, and administrators. FCPS has been training teachers in both letters, which is language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling, and Orton-Gillingham this current school year, and plans to continue this work and offer these opportunities to more teachers across the division in the coming school years. Reading specialists will participate in robust dyslexia training during the 23-24 school year, covering topics such as techniques to help a student on the continuum of skills with dyslexia, dyslexia characteristics that may manifest at different ages and grade levels, the basic foundation of the keys to reading, including multisensory, explicit, systematic, and structured reading instruction, and appropriate interventions, accommodations, and assistive technology supports for students with dyslexia. The Virginia Literacy Act also includes components focused on pre-service teacher preparation to ensure future teacher candidates are also trained in the science of reading and evidence-based literacy instruction. In addition to these core components that we just reviewed, that were initially designed for grades K through 3, the Virginia Literacy Act has been extended to include grades 4 through 8. What you see on the screen is outlining the shifts that we just discussed as part of the Virginia Literacy Act and will now extend through grades 4 through 8. This extension will also go into effect for the start of the 24-25 school year. If you're interested in additional information on the Virginia Literacy Act, the Virginia Department of Education has their own webpage dedicated solely to the Virginia Literacy Act. You can use the QR code found on the screen to access this website, or a quick Google search of Virginia Literacy Act will pull it up. So now that we understand some of the shifts and components of the Virginia Literacy Act, many of those fell under the bucket of science of reading. So what exactly is the science of reading? It's a vast interdisciplinary body of scientifically based research about reading and issues related to reading and writing. Because of its social importance and complexity, the study of reading acquisition has invited more study and research than any other aspect of human cognition. The results from research in various fields, including cognitive psychology, communication sciences, developmental psychology, education, neuroscience, and linguistics, have converged on one common and clear portrait of how children learn to read. The Virginia Literacy Act really hits on the importance of the science of reading and ensuring that instruction is aligned to the science and that teachers and administrators are knowledgeable about it. We need to be using and doing what we know to have large positive effect sizes on student outcomes. Now we'll take a few minutes to explore 4 related visual models of literacy that have emerged from this research. FCPS uses these models as the theoretical framework for the creation of the Equitable Access to Literacy Plan, which we'll discuss in more detail in a bit. If you're an educator joining me today, the simple view of reading that you see on your screen likely looks familiar. It's a major component of letters training, and the professional development has been provided by the Language Arts Office last year. Word reading times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. Both factors must be present for reading comprehension to occur. This is why it is a multiplication equation rather than an addition problem. The simple view of reading is revolutionary if we allow it to guide decisions about instructional time. It demonstrates that there isn't anything particularly special about understanding text. Students can understand text as easily as oral language if they can decode it. That means shifting some of our instructional time that has previously been devoted solely to reading comprehension and moving more instructional time to the underpinnings of reading comprehension. Because if you can get the words off the page and you have the ability to understand the spoken word, you can understand a story you're reading just as well as a story that is told to you. Over 180 studies, including brain research on early readers, have since substantiated this view. The goal of reading is, and has always been, reading comprehension. All educators want to equip students to meaningfully interact with what they've read. Using a science of reading aligned approach would devote the bulk of instructional time in developing the foundational skills for word reading and for language comprehension, and would result in exponential growth in reading comprehension. While the concept on this slide is simple, the next model will demonstrate that there is nothing simple about reading acquisition and the foundational skills that contribute to it. Our second anchor is an infographic Hollis Scarborough created to detail all of the foundational skills that contribute to skilled reading. Think of it as the simple view equation turned sideways. Word recognition times language comprehension equals skilled reading with comprehension. Scarborough intentionally placed language comprehension on the top of this infographic because it begins to develop at birth for typically developing children. The language comprehension skills are represented in a twist. Strengths in one thread can compensate for weaknesses in another at any given time. But the stronger each are, the more strategic the reader can become. The bottom strands are in a braid because all 3 are necessary to develop word recognition. If one strand is weak, the braid will be compromised. As all 3 strands are developed, typically developing readers become increasingly fluent, slowing down only when encountering unfamiliar words. Phonological awareness is the understanding that a stream of English speech can be broken down into smaller units, like words, syllables, and individual sounds. The individual sound level of awareness is called phonemic awareness. Decoding instruction involves the alphabetic principle, the idea that speech sounds can be represented with print. It also requires phonics. Learning how each of these phonemes matches with the corresponding letter or set of letters, like sh is spelled sh. For researchers, sight vocabulary does not only refer to high-frequency words, it refers to all words currently in a reader's bank of immediately recognized words. So for you, as skilled readers, every word on this slide would be a sight word. However, that doesn't mean that you process it as a whole unit, but we'll get to that on the next slide. The third anchor helps us understand exactly what happens in the brain when you're engaged in the act of reading. First, you encounter a string of symbols, which activates the orthographic processor. You can think of another word for spelling is orthography. If you look in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, there's a string of symbols. You likely won't recognize what the string of symbols means because we don't know the code yet. That particular word happens to be print. But again, we don't know that, having not been taught that specific symbol code. But when we see the letter N, we recognize that letter and we can name it. We can also put a sound to it because we've been taught the code. Once we have that in place, we can start using those sounds within words. We can blend them to create the words, to decode the words, and now we can give meaning to it. And then finally, we can take that word and embed it into context so that we can understand or comprehend what it is that we're reading. Finally, we have the writing rope. The ability to write is as essential to learning as the ability to read. It is necessary and a predictor of academic success. The writing rope organizes multiple writing skills, strategies, and techniques into 5 components that represent the elements of comprehensive writing curriculum: critical thinking, syntax, text structure, writing craft, and transcription. As we redesign writing instruction in grades K through 8, some of the instructional focuses will include explicit instruction in grammar and sentence construction and mechanics that are frequently connected to meaningful writing to support transfer to authentic writing and writing about reading in all classrooms. So what do all these anchors mean? Let's break down these concepts. Universal means for everyone. This needs to be delivered through core instruction rather than delivered only after a student shows sign of reading failure. Direct and explicit means that we're going to isolate and target the specific skill a student is to acquire in a lesson rather than have students infer the skills that they are meant to acquire, leave it to chance, expose students to skills without instruction, or limit instruction of these skills to when or where they show up in text, sometimes referred to as embedded instruction. Second, this instruction should be systematic, meaning in an intentional order of difficulty that matches development. Should also be cumulative, meaning we review past knowledge with students as we help them add to it. This instruction should address both sets of foundational skills, those for language comprehension, such as background knowledge and vocabulary, and those for word recognition, such as phonemic awareness and phonics. In addition, instruction in the writing process and writing strategies, including frequent writing for varied purposes that builds student engagement in the context of a writing community, is essential to strong core literacy instruction. This will meet the needs of about 85% of students, while 15% of students will need intervention in these skills and additional time, practice, and application to support their acquisition. Students who need additional support should be identified early with assessments. Database intervention should be provided to proactively prevent reading failure. Now that we have an understanding of the requirements in the Virginia Literacy Act and what the science of reading is, let's take some time to explore FCPS's Equitable Access to Literacy Plan. The Equitable Access to Literacy Plan, also known as EAL, is a division-wide commitment to aligning our practices pre-K through 12 with the science of reading. The Equitable Access to Literacy Plan, the work arose as a direct outgrowth of 3 factors. First, our focus on equity requires we address persistent patterns of reading failure so that reading success is not predictable along lines of privilege. Secondly, the evidence base for science of reading is compelling and convergent. We know what all students need to become successful readers. Third, recent legislation passed in Virginia requires that all students receive instruction aligned with the science of reading. The goals of the EAL plan provide us with an opportunity to increase access to high-quality instruction that is evidence-based, aligned to the science of reading, and grounded in the Virginia Literacy Act, so that all students are prepared to be literate global citizens. FCPS formally began the complex and multi-year process of aligning FCPS's elementary language arts instruction with the science of reading last year, and will engage in continuous improvement over the coming years to continue these efforts. As part of the improvement process, we've identified high leverage practices and key evidence-based shifts in instructional practice that will support division level and school improvement of student literacy outcomes. Moving to the high leverage practices on the previous slide requires a shift away from balanced literacy and towards a science of reading alignment. When teachers implement the instructional moves associated with these shifts, student literacy outcomes are improved. On the screen is 5 of the shifts outlined in the Equitable Access to Literacy Plan and the high leverage practice that aligns to the shift. Shift 1 focuses on oral language development, where teachers will intentionally provide opportunities for oral language development within the core language arts block and throughout the day. Shift 2 is focusing on skill-based small group instruction by using evidence-based literacy practices to explicitly and systematically teach the skills necessary for fluent word reading, such as phonemic awareness, phonics, and fluency. Shift 3 focuses on language comprehension skills, utilizing evidence-based practices to explicitly and systematically teach language comprehension. Shift 4 focuses on writing and using evidence-based literacy practices to provide systematic writing instruction and active practice for writing in the core language arts block. Finally, Shift 6 looks at creating and implementing a clear system for evidence-based intervention, ensuring that intervention resources are aligned to the science of reading and that students receive an intervention based on their need. So what does this mean for FCPS? In the area of core instruction, we'll be adopting and implementing a core curriculum aligned with science of reading from the forthcoming approved list from VDOE for grades K through 6. In the area of intervention, we'll be providing reading intervention services to students in grades K through 8 who do not meet benchmark requirements. We'll be adopting and implementing intervention resources from the forthcoming VDOE approved list for K through 8. Reading plans will be implemented for every student in grades K through 8 falling below benchmark, and the plan will be developed in partnership with a reading specialist and families. For the assessments, we continue to implement the early literacy screener in grades K through 3, the iReady universal screener in grades K through 6, and the reading inventory screener in grades 7 through 12. The use of diagnostic assessments such as the core phonics, passage reading fluency, oral reading fluency, and the developmental spelling assessments will continue to be used to identify skills that students may need additional support with. We'll also be implementing progress monitoring measures for students in grades K through 8 that have a reading plan. Our reading specialists will develop and oversee implementation of, monitor student progress on the student reading plans. They'll be trained in the science of reading, Orton Gillingham, and receive dyslexia training. They will become, at the start of the 24-25 school year, the dyslexia advisor for the school building. In the area of professional development, We'll continue to train teachers and administrators in evidence-based literacy instruction for students in grades K through 8. So what does this mean for students with dyslexia and/or dysgraphia? Think back to our grounding when we took a few minutes to envision what high-quality literacy instruction included or looks like for our students with dyslexia and/or dysgraphia. Think back to the anchors that we covered in our discussion about the science of reading. Hopefully, some of the essential components are words and strategies we just discussed within the instructional shifts for our core literacy blocks in K-6 and in English language arts classes in grades 7 and 8. What these shifts mean for our students with dyslexia and/or dysgraphia is that they'll have access to high-quality, evidence-based instructional strategies that align to the science of reading within their core literacy instruction and within multiple tiers of intervention that may be required to meet their needs. Early identification will be possible thanks to the shifts made within assessments from universal screening to diagnostic assessments. In addition, the role of the dyslexia advisor within each school building will provide each school a highly trained individual that can speak to the needs of students with dyslexia. The VDOE, or the Virginia Department of Education, is also creating parent resources to be utilized at home with students who require reading plans and writing interventions. The partnership between schools and parents is imperative to our students' success. Having reading plans for our students with dyslexia and/or dysgraphia that may not require an individualized education plan or special education services, but still require some level of intervention supports, will provide a formalized system for ensuring that students receive the support that they need and ensures that parents are involved in the process. As these shifts begin to set in, students with dyslexia and/or dysgraphia will start to receive more of what they need within their core language arts block. This may reduce the amount of time spent outside of the classroom receiving intervention and/or special education services. To learn more about dyslexia and resources provided by the district, please visit the FCPS Dyslexia Handbook, which can be found on the FCPS website. It provides a wealth of information about dyslexia, characteristics of dyslexia at different developmental stages, district resources for supporting students with dyslexia, and information on the English language arts curriculum for core, intervention, and special education. As a parent, you may find that you would like additional information specific to your child's educational planning, progress, or you may suspect dyslexia. If this is the case, please reach out to your child's school team to share your concerns. They should be able to answer your questions and guide you with potential next steps. Should your child be going through the special education eligibility or IEP process and you have specific questions regarding your child's case, please contact the educational specialist from the Office of Special Education Instruction for the region in which your child attends school. Their contact information is provided on the screen. They are able to provide support to the school-based teams providing instruction and intervention. To add additional support through the assessment and evaluation process, we also have a region representative from the Office of School Psychology Services. If you have specific questions regarding assessment and suspected dyslexia, please contact the region representative for your child's school. I collaborate with our point of contact from the Office of Special Education Instruction as well as the Office of School Psychology Services to support all students across the division. A good part of my time and focus is providing support to the English language arts curriculum team, both elementary and secondary, as we're making large shifts in instructional practice and curriculum. I partner with our school teams to support students across the division, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have as a parent. I also wanted to mention that in addition to district resources, there's a wealth of information to be learned from our community partners as well. This is not an exhaustive list, but the Fairfax County SEPTA, or Special Education Parent-Teacher Association, has a deep understanding of dyslexia in addition to other disabilities, as well as a deep understanding of special education processes and resources. Decoding Dyslexia is a grassroots parent organization that advocates for the needs of students with dyslexia. Both organizations are important partners in our work with implementing the Equitable Access to Literacy Plan. Finally, as educators and parents wanting to learn more about the science of reading, the Reading League Virginia chapter provides many professional development opportunities throughout the year. I encourage you to learn more about them, their work, and to partner with them and us to ensure all children in Fairfax County have access to high-quality literacy instruction. I hope that this has provided you with additional information about the Virginia Literacy Act, FCPS's Equitable Access to Literacy Plan, and the instructional shifts happening in grades K through 8 literacy instruction and how they will benefit our students with dyslexia and/or dysgraphia. It has been a pleasure exploring this work with you. If you have additional questions regarding this work or presentation, please feel free to contact me. My email address is on the screen. Thank you.